Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Diverse Thinking, Different Learning podcast. I'm your host, Karen Wilson. I am recording this in April, and like many people, I am starting to think about summer travel plans. Travel brings the world together, and now thanks to a growing focus on those who think and learn differently, it is more accessible than ever before. My guest, Dawn Barclay, is an award-winning author who has spent a career working in different aspects of the travel industry. And she joins us today to offer helpful tips and travel strategies for parents of anxious, inflexible, and neurodivergent children.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Dawn. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
You know, one of the things I said to you before we hit record is that this is perfect timing. We're recording this in April, and many of our listeners are starting to plan their summer vacations. And I'm a parent. There are a lot of parents who listen to this podcast. Traveling with children is challenging, but parents of neurodiverse kids, you know, they often say that the idea of traveling can be very daunting and intimidating. Their fears about their child's sensory issues, emotional meltdowns, anxiety, discomfort in novel situations, you know, gets in the way. But you argue that everyone is entitled to travel and that parents' fears should not keep families from traveling.
Absolutely right. In fact, there was a study I've mentioned before of 1,000 special needs parents. And it was originally done in 2018. And in 2018, 87% of those parents said they won't travel. And of those, 93% said they would if they knew where to go and what to do. And there were people who understood their needs. So that study, which was conducted by a group called IBCCES, was updated in 2022. And at that point, that number, 87%, went down to 78%. So even though that's still a huge number, it's still more than 3/4 of parents with children with invisible disabilities weren't traveling. It is 9% better. And the 93% went up to 94%. So I went back to IBCCES and I asked the president, why do you think there was this dramatic change? And she said it was because there are so many groups that are now educating and credentialing different modes of transportation, different venues, hotels, restaurants, theme parks, what have you, and more people are aware of the needs of those on the spectrum and with other invisible disabilities. And the thing is that what I found in my own research about why people weren't traveling are exactly what you said. They were scared that their child would have a meltdown and people would judge them as parents and judge their children, and they just didn't want to deal with it.
And, you know, I'm really encouraged to hear that more families are stepping out and traveling. And because traveling really opens up the world to families. You know, it has so many advantages in terms of creating bonds, creating memories, and giving children and parents to the opportunity to share new and cultural experiences together.
Yes, and see that there is more of a world than outside their own home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you wrote what some people call the travel Bible for families with children who are on the spectrum or who have mood or attention difficulties. Your book, Traveling Different, Vacation Strategies for Parents of the Anxious, the Inflexible, and the Neurodiverse. And you created that book based on conversations with a number of parents and mental health professionals.
Yes, I interviewed over 100 people. They were mental health experts like Dr. Tony Atwood, who is large in the ASD world, Dr. Ellen Littman, who's very well known in ADHD circles. I spoke to many certified autism travel professionals. And many of those most of them are special needs parents themselves, and also different organizations, allies, advocates.
And so for parents who don't even know where to start, they want to travel with their family. They have a child who has specific needs. They may not even know where to start in designing a vacation. Do you have any tips in terms of where to even get started?
Yes, absolutely. Aside from buying the book.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and listening to podcasts like this. The first thing is to really get your child on board by introducing the concept of travel. And you do that way in advance. You just never spring a trip on a child, whether they're on the spectrum or not. So ways to introduce the concept of travel include reading picture books to the child with their favorite characters in travel situations. And I have some in the book, but also your librarian can recommend the best ones for you. Role play. I spoke to a teacher who had a student who was going to be taking their first plane ride, and she set up the whole classroom like an airplane, and they took turns with announcing over a microphone what was going to be happening and walking down the aisles. And this is a great way for the child to learn not to kick the seat in front of them or not to press the call button all the time. So the role play is great. We live in an age of video, which is a wonderful help because you can show a video either from the supplier themselves or via YouTube of any aspect of the trip. And the whole idea is to create some predictability around that trip. Children crave predictability. They love routine. There's nothing about travel that is predictable or routine. So you have to make it so. And that's through planning and visualizing what's going to happen. You can also use social stories. And I imagine your listeners know what social stories are, but if they don't, it is a way of telling stories that was created by an autism expert named Carol Gray, and you can certainly buy books about it. Very helpful. So all those are ways to introduce the concept of travel. And then start small. Maybe take the child locally to museums, children's museums, or a zoo or an aquarium, or a treasure hunt. Have a treasure hunt at a flea market or at a yard sale. These are, call them tours, because then when you take the real tour, the child hopefully has had a great experience previously, has a positive frame of reference, and they can apply that to the new trip. Also, mini experiences. I talk about that a lot in the book. So before you take a very long car ride, take a short car ride. Before you take a cruise, take a ferry ride. Or before you take a long train ride, take a commuter ride. Now, if you're filming this or recording this in April, which is great because it's Autism Awareness Month. So the ARC announced Wings for Autism, which is held, I believe, in about 70 airports around the country. And this gives you a dress rehearsal of the airport, which can be a very frantic and frenetic place for a child, but from arrival up until boarding. So that's a great way to experience that. There are lots of ways to sample in a small way before you have the real trip. And that can include even setting up a tent in your backyard or staying at a friend's house overnight if the child has never slept for a night away from home, because then you're going to see where the triggers lie. You're going to find out whether the child needs the sheets and blankets from home with the familiar texture and scent. Same thing with toiletries. Do they need a nightlight? Do they need a fan to drown out the sound from the hallway? It's good to find these things all out in advance.
Right. And it just seems that from everything you've just said, that preparation is really key. And having almost like those dress rehearsals that you described in terms of a ferry before a cruise, an overnight trip with a friend before you stay in, a hotel. All of those things are part of that preparation process so that you know what to expect and then you can plan in advance for the real trip.
Yes, absolutely. And it's important to try to create a child-centric vacation. And what I mean by that is not only are you going to plan every aspect in advance, but even getting the child's input on a lot of this. So maybe you and your partner vet 3 different vacations. Maybe you work with a certified autism travel professional and you've worked out 3 great vacations. Let the child make the final decision, because then they have some skin in the game and they have a vested interest in the success of the trip. You can do that for daily activities as well. Let them choose what's going to happen during the day, even if it's just one part of the day. Pace the trip so it works with the child. You can no longer try to fit in 5 or 6 different visits in a day like you might have before you had children. Pick one thing and then spend the afternoon by the pool or in front of the TV so the child can decompress. And also, if your child has a special interest, which is true for many, many children on the spectrum, build a trip around that special interest.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds from what you were saying earlier about the airports that parents can reach out to airports and maybe even the TSA in advance.
Yeah, there is a group there's an organization called TSA Cares. And it varies in the different airports. So it's not a standardized system across the board, but if your airport offers it, at the very best, they can provide you with someone to shadow you. So when you're going through different aspects like security, there's somebody to help you out and keep the child calm and work everything out for you. So TSA Cares is an important place to call.
Wonderful. And, so in addition to kind of preparing your child ahead of time, having these, dress rehearsals, reaching out to TSA, there are also some just practical things parents can do in terms of making sure you're booking your seats in advance. So, I've talked to so many parents who book a trip and then realize they're not even sitting with their children and then have to scramble with the airline to get everyone to sit together.
Yeah. Again, if you're working with a specialist travel agent, and that shouldn't cost you anything more than booking on your own, they're going to take care of all that for you. And it's not even just a matter of getting the seats, but letting the airport and the airline know in advance that you have a child with special needs. If you're going to know where to sit based on your child. So if your child is going to get more anxious if there are a lot of people in front of them and he or she sees a lot of action going on all throughout the flight, maybe you want to sit further forward. The opposite, maybe they enjoy seeing all that, so you want to sit further back, especially if, but if they can't stand horrible smells, you're not going to want to seat them near the bathroom.
Right.
So you're also going to know, because you know your child, and all children are different, whether you should board early or board at the last moment. So again, it's all child dependent, but you can tell your travel planner that and they can make those arrangements for you.
And that's really, again, great advice, because, parents want to make that car trip or that airplane ride more pleasant. And it sounds like those are specific tips that can help with that. In addition to maybe even having your, creature comforts in your child's backpack, things that they enjoy to have on the plane and readily available.
Your go-to bag should always have their favorite snacks. It should have always your noise-canceling headphones, electronics loaded with their favorite TV shows and movies, fidget toys, anything that's going to make the trip more palatable for them, along with a change of clothes, not only for them, but maybe a change of blouse for you in case, as happened to me, there's some spontaneous vomit that you did not expect.
Right. And sometimes, excessive turbulence can trigger some of that as well.
Yeah.
For parents who are traveling with an anxious child, are there things that you recommend for kids who have anxiety? I know that some of the things you've already recommended are going to be incredibly helpful, just in terms of helping kids prepare for the trip and really helping them to know what to expect. It seems that's a big factor.
The reason I titled the book the way I did is because everything that I recommend for children on the spectrum work for every child. And I think every child becomes anxious and inflexible when they're faced with the unknown, as we all do. But children may not be able to vocalize that. So you have to anticipate that that's what's bothering them. They don't know what's going to happen. So I believe previewing everything is really important. And I spoke to one father who sits with his child and they go over every ride that they were thinking of taking at the amusement park or the theme park so they know what to rule out. Another father did not realize that they don't serve ice cream at Disney at 9 a.m. Doesn't start until 10 a.m. So he learned the hard way, but you can
Right.
benefit from his experience. So what happened was that the child melted down. And what he did was he called his travel professional who guided him to a low sensory area, a quieter area in the park where the child could decompress until ice cream was available. So again, I think of my book as a checklist and gives you every aspect of the trip to consider in advance so you know what to think about, because it's very hard to know what you don't know, or rule out, I have to do everything, but what is everything? So I try to set up the book so you have how to prepare in advance, like what I said about introducing the concept of travel, starting small, pacing the trip, but then everything related to getting there, everything related to where you stay, and everything related to what to do once you get there.
Right. And when considering where to stay,
Yeah.
what are some things that parents should consider?
So between, I talk about hotels, vacation rentals, camping, dude ranch, even a houseboat, and the benefits and things to worry about. But if you're staying in a hotel, which I think most people will be doing, make sure you have a kitchen or a kitchenette, because that's going to help you so much, because many children are finicky eaters, and you don't want to change the times that they're used to eating. But what if they're early eaters? You want to make sure the restaurant's not open yet. You want to be able to feed them before you go out. And you don't want to have a lot of crowds and anxiety around eating. So having a kitchenette is really great. I also recommend, if your child needs sensory stimulation, getting a hotel with a pool and a playground. And if you're going to have to buy food locally because you can't travel with perishables, make sure that the brands you need are offered in the local supermarkets, because you're going to be doing some shopping. With vacation rentals, a lot of that is taken care of for you. And there is a really great website. There's a lady named Lorraine Woodward, and she started an organization called Becoming Rentable. And they vet vacation rentals for people in wheelchairs, people with invisible disabilities, people with hearing and vision impairment. So she found that these hotels, or Airbnbs, or what have you, self-regulate. They self-report to the larger companies. So, you're going by what they think, but that might not be what you need. And it might not be really realistic. And the last thing you want to do is show up thinking that you're staying at, say, a hotel a vacation rental that's accessible, and it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I recommend her organization. They don't sell anything. All they do is they vet these vacation rentals, and they list them.
Okay. Wonderful. And so those are a lot of things to consider, again, in terms of where you're staying, whether it's an Airbnb, whether it's a hotel, vacation rental, houseboat, whatever that might be. A lot of things to consider. And then that's all part of that pre-planning process.
Yeah. And then there are resorts that you can stay at, which where everything's included. Couple that come to mind are beaches, both in Turks and Caicos and Jamaica, and they are the world's first advanced certified autism centers. So they have gone above and beyond, and something worth considering, where all of the staff has been trained to work with people on the spectrum or who are anxious and inflexible, and the kids clubs have lower sensory areas, and there are also areas in the resort that are lower sensory, and there's you can arrange for a special check-in, and there's special dietary considerations that have been taken care of. So all worth looking into. Same thing with many cruises. Many cruise lines are trained for people on the spectrum, and there is an organization called Autism on the Seas that actually creates group cruises for families with children on the spectrum.
Wonderful. These are just such great resources and things that parents may not have even known was available to them.
Yeah.
So I thank you so much for putting this together.
Yeah, I find that most people don't even know that there are certified autism travel professionals. I do talks around the area, and this is the number one thing I hear is, I never even realized there were professionals who did that.
Right.
So yeah, and they can take so much of the planning off your hands.
And once individuals, parents, families are at their destination, you mentioned that when you're planning your trip and you have your child involved in that process, to choose venues that can cater to your child's needs.
Yeah. And also to their interests. So if you have a child who loves dinosaurs, for example, why aren't you planning a trip around dinosaur museums? And they don't all have to be in Utah and Colorado. There's dinosaur museums in Connecticut. There's just a matter of doing your research. But I interviewed one parent who had a son. They were in Wisconsin and they passed the Mustard Museum, the National Mustard Museum, and their child has a thing about mustard.
Right.
And they got him in there. And it's all he talks about is how wonderful that was and how they arranged it just for him. And so it created a terrific memory. So I spoke to parents with all manner of interest for their children. I mean, to the point where somebody just liked going up in elevators, which is a really easy interest to cater to since there are elevators everywhere. But in the book, I listed tons of these interests and then where you can go around the country, a sampling of where you could go to satisfy those interests, including grain elevators.
One of the things that you said when we first started this discussion was, parents are not only looking for places that they can take their kids who may have unique challenges, unique needs, and there are things that keep them from planning vacations. And one of the things that keeps them from planning vacations is not only, they're concerned about how their child will respond to sensory overload or to their own anxiety-provoking cues, but they're concerned about those insensitive onlookers, those individuals on the plane or at the resort. Can you speak to how parents can deal with that aspect of their trip?
I have a whole section in the book dedicated to that. And it was interesting when I asked the parents this because they varied. Some of the parents had worked very hard to have their child feel comfortable in themselves. So there was one mom who had talked to her child and gotten her child confident enough that this child would go up to strangers who were staring at her and say, "Hi, my name is blah, 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 and I have autism. And look, when I get excited, I wave my hands. Look, see, isn't this cool?" And I thought, how great to have a child that's so accepting of themselves that they didn't see this as an issue. This was part of them. So one suggestion is to get the child. I mean, it's a little hard to do that after the fact if people are listening now and they have a child who's 10 and it's a little late. But I suppose you can always make kids feel comfortable about themselves. But for the onlookers, the idea is really to never make what they think more important than your child. Your child has to be your number one priority. So if your child starts melting down, I mean, you know how you calm them at home, and I would rely on that. I'm not going to tell people how to calm their child, but take them to a quiet area and give them snack or quiet, get them away from whatever was upsetting them. And ignore the people, or if you insist people are looking around, you can give them a shrug and a smile and say, what can you do? Don't take it personally. Don't worry about what they're thinking. I always say there's two types of people in the world: people who know you and people who don't. The people who know you are going to think everything you do is okay and they'll treat you with grace. The people who don't know you, you're never going to see again. So who cares what they think?
I love that advice. That is so great. And then again, just to put your child and their needs first, which I think every parent will do, as hard as it is to ignore sometimes the looks or the comments of other people.
Some parents bring along little cards and hand them out that explain, my child has autism. This is what you might experience. I mean, if you're getting on the plane and you're worried about that, you might hand these to people on your row. There's some parents who give out little gifts on the airplane, figuring if I gave them chocolate, maybe they'll give me some grace if my child starts screaming. I mean, my kids started screaming on planes. My daughter hated the atmospheric pressure. Her ears would be killing her. And it was just being in a single place for a long time. And what my husband did, because this is my other piece of advice, is to always use humor and get through life with humor. My husband took out the barf bags from the seat in front of him. He started crayoning and he created barf bag theater. And you had a little puppet show for
Right.
my children, and they still talk about this and they love this. So I put it in the book. It's like everything in life, deal with it with humor and you'll get through. This is the basis of my entire life, is sort of laughing my way through.
Which makes me think of what parents can actually do for themselves, because I think so much of the focus is on making sure that your child is cared for and feels supported during this experience. But parents also need to take care of themselves.
Yeah. It's never a bad idea to bring another family member to take care of the child so you can have a little time off with your significant other. There are special needs agencies that give you babysitters, and I profile some in the book. If you need to take somebody with you, they'll fly with you. You can vet them in advance. I would absolutely have them meet your child via Zoom ahead of time or in person if you can. Sometimes they're at the local area, and so you're not going to be able to meet them in person, but you can certainly do it over Zoom and get the child used to them and, ask around and get references. But never a bad idea to have some private time for yourself. And that's another great thing about kids clubs, if they've been trained for take care of anxious kids or kids on the spectrum, because that gives you some time alone to do what you enjoy.
Right. And getting a good night's sleep the night before you leave doesn't
always.
hurt either.
Always.
So, Dawn, family travel, like we were saying, provides just such a great opportunity for families to create memories, like you were saying. And there are also educational and bonding benefits to travel. And you've really provided some great guidance and great tips for families who are traveling with kids who have unique needs. If parents want to reach out to you to get some additional guidance, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I would go to my website, which is travelingdifferent.com. And on there, I have a blog that has new information. I supplement the book. I made some corrections from the book. And I had one podcaster who said, so Dawn, what do you do with the child when you get home? How do you help them come down from this experience? I thought, wow, that would have been a great final chapter of my book. So I was like, thank goodness I have the blog, because I wrote a whole piece. I researched and wrote a whole piece and put it there. Or information on this becoming rentable. That isn't in the book, but I found out about it afterwards. So this is an ongoing resource, and it's free for people so they can get that. There is a page on there that describes where you can order the book, and it's everywhere. I mean, it's at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and online and independent bookstores. All the websites you can order it remotely, and have it sent to you, either Kindle or hardcover or audiobook. So it's on Audible as well. And they can get a hold of me via the website if they want to book me to speak to their special needs group. And I've got links to great podcasts like this. So it's a good resource. So travelingdifferent.com, and on there they can also reach me. So if they have encountered a different way of doing things than I included, or they have they take some issue with some of the things I say and they have a better way, tell me, because I can write a whole blog about it. To me, this is a big crowdsourcing effort. This is not my story. So if you have some information, I would love to either put it in an updated version of the book when it comes out, or put it on the website. And if I've opened up the world for you in any way, I would love to hear about that too.
Wonderful, Dawn. Thank you so much. Thank you for writing this book, for providing these resources to parents, to families. I appreciate you, and thank you so much for being here. I'll definitely put a link to the Traveling Different website and to your blog in the show notes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, and have a happy Autism Awareness Month.
Thanks so much to Dawn for joining us on the podcast today and for giving us such great tips and travel strategies. Be sure to check out the show notes, where you will find a link to her book, which is filled with excellent resources. And be sure to get on our email list at childnexus.com so you'll get information about how to support kids who think and learn differently. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.